July 25th marks 2 years since President Kais Saied took complete control over Tunisia. His action has been termed a presidential coup. How has the country fared since then? Multiple parts of India have been experiencing flooding over the past few weeks. How is such an economic power facing floods in so many states? And Facebook's owner Meta has been fined 14 million US dollars for undisclosed collection of data. But is this anything more than just a rap on the knuckles? We'll be delving into these stories in this episode of Daily Debrief. Keep watching. On July 25, 2021, Tunisian President Kais Saied took over the country, dismissing the government and suspending parliament. Over the past 2 years, he has pretty much shaped the Tunisian state according to his own vision. But the people of the country don't seem very enthusiastic, and the proof is in the fact that there has been very little participation in all his initiatives. Meanwhile, the political opposition and civil society has been on the streets relentlessly against Said, often at great cost. Many leaders are now in jail. To understand Kais Said's agenda, let's go to Abdul. Abdul, we have talked often about Tunisia on this show. I mean, there's been a lot happening over the past 2 years, and in recent times we talked a lot about the migrants as well. But let's first take a larger picture, so to speak. So maybe could you first tell us what happened on July 26, 2021, and what has the trajectory been since?
On July 26, 2021, Kais Saied, after his election, within few months of his election, he basically declared the current system of Tunisia to be corrupt and inefficient, and dismissed the elected government at the time. Within few months, he also promised that there will be he is starting a political process, quote-unquote political process, to reform the Tunisian politics, which emerged post 2011, with the idea that there will be no corruption and there will be more efficient governance. These were the basic objectives of his so-called political reform, which the political opposition basically termed political coup. Within few months, he also basically dismissed the parliament, which was kept in suspension, appointed an interim government, which still continues. And last year in July, he, despite the opposition, despite going through any consultation, broader consultation with the opposition parties and other groups, in fact, the so-called dialogue which he initiated to form the constitution, most of the groups boycotted it. Still, he went ahead and kind of declared a new constitution, went for referendum, which was participated. Very popular participation was really poor. Around 25% people came and voted. Still, he adopted the constitution, and according to that new constitution, there was an election held in December. This election, of course, again was controversial, again saw a very low popular participation, and there had to be different rounds to be held because the participation was so low and there were not enough candidates. Still, that election were conducted, and it has been several months. Still, there has been no clarity what happened to the people who were elected in that election. So this has been, meanwhile, all these years, opposition has mobilized on the street and opposed both and basically asked for the boycott of the referendum and boycott of the election. And it seems that the people in Tunisia in large were ready to hear what the opposition was saying, which was basically Kais Saied's attempts to so-called political reforms, is basically an attempt to expropriate power and recreate the regime which was there before 2011, the Ben Ali regime.
Right, Abdul, also I think important to note that he's unleashed a lot of repression as well. Different sections have been targeted.
In around scores of political opposition, including one of the leaders of the largest political party in Tunisia, Rashid Ghannouchi, is behind bars. Supreme Court, in fact, the judiciary has been revamped. Kais Saied has basically taken power to appoint judges as per his wish. He has also started trying different civilian politicians under military code. there has been an attempt to portray all the opposition forces as corrupt and inefficient. They have been not only charged for different kinds of alleged or real corruption, but also accused of sponsoring terrorism during the rise of ISIS in Syria and Iraq in 2014-15. Some of the leaders have, in fact, the leaders of the trade union movement, the largest trade union movement in the country, has also prosecuted. He spent a lot of time behind bars. Then the leaders of the media organizations, considered to be little bit liberal, critical to what Kais Saied was doing, have been targeted again and again. So all these things basically that basically strengthen the allegations made by the opposition that Kais Saied is basically trying to recreate Ben Ali's regime, and his idea is not about establishing democracy. It's basically a compromise to not compromise. In fact, it is a coup against the progressive ideas or the democratic ideas which were established during 2011 popular uprising. So if you see the constitution, they claim the new so-called new constitution gives so much power to the president that he can do whatever he wants to do, and completely diminishes the institutions like parliament or the judiciary. So these are the things which have happened in last 2 years in Tunisia.
Right. Also, Abdul, of course, one reason when Kais Saied was being elected, one of the reasons supposedly for his popularity was the fact that Tunisians were, had a bit, were really tired of what had happened in the past 10 years. There was a lot of political chaos. The economy was really in a bad shape. Unemployment was very high, and there was a general sense of drift, which was what Kais Saied capitalized on, like you said, blaming the political class for everything. But especially on the economic crisis, has he really managed to turn things around?
Of course, that is one thing which basically you can say basically questions the entire credibility which Kais Saied tried to build post his whatever political processes started in 2021. Tunisia, of course, the post-2011 political elite completely failed to address the economic concerns of the Tunisian youth, of employment and better living conditions. And Tunisia was in an economic mess, no doubt. But ever since Kais Saied has come to power, none of those concerns have been even partially addressed. The unemployment remains high, particularly among the youth. The state's finances are in mess, despite the fact that IMF had agreed to provide loan and asked so-called to initiate so-called reforms, which would have further meant trouble for the common people. That basically, given the fact that Kais Saied was trying to build a populist, he thought that this is a populist move. Those reforms would have kind of questioned his legitimacy, and that was one thing which Kais Saied could not do, has not yet done. But despite all those reservations, the subsidies on basic things have been reduced. Health sector, the food and other things are in mess. So common Tunisians, when it comes to economic performance, when they compare Kais Saied's last 2 years at least, and the regime or the political parties which were power before that, there is no difference. In fact, the situation has gone bad to worse. So all claims of inefficiency of the opposition post 2011 elite seems to basically seems to be a bogus claim, and his government is not any different from what was there before, at least. But the only difference one can see, that at least the government before was at least had the pretensions of being democratic.
Right. So Abdul, looks like Kais Saied is actually running, his own state completely cut off from the people. Exactly. And, definitely as Tunisia's crisis intensifies, it looks like I think he'll face more pressure from all sections of society.
Exactly.
And I guess it's no surprise that he's trying to scapegoat the migrants at this point to show that there is some outside enemy.
That is an attempt to polarize the society.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Abdul, for talking to us. Our next story is from India, where big cities and small villages alike have been hit by flooding over the past few weeks. Social media has been full of astounding visuals, and many have been left wondering why a country that prides itself on its development and growth is struggling so much. Activists and experts say that it's more than just intense rainfall. It's also about how cities are built and how we understand development itself. We have with us Pragya, who has been reporting on the flooding in different parts of the country. Pragya, we've been seeing reports of flooding in different parts of the country. In fact, the flooding seems to be hitting the diverse sections of the Indian country, the Himalayas, the plains, the western regions, big cities, small villages. Every part of it seems affected. So maybe let's take a macro picture and if you can maybe talk about some of the larger trends which maybe lead to this kind of flooding.
Right, Prashant, it's actually getting a little difficult to just sort of cope with reporting on all of these disasters which are unfolding across the country. Each region seems to have its own reasons for a problem. Somewhere there's a river, like in the higher reaches of the Himalayas, there seems to be damming, which has led to over spillage. In the desertified regions of India, in the western parts, there seems to be again dams which are either spilling over or the river is breaching its embankments because of excessive rainfall.
Right.
So there's also like a few incidents like in the lower central part in the Deccan region, there is simply a flash flood or there is a landslide occurring on some constructions that have occurred on the higher reaches of foothills. So a diverse set of reasons for these sort of disasters, but overall the picture is nothing like we've actually seen before. We had floods being reported across the country and people were obviously linking it with the climate change effects. But this time we've had conversations with a number of experts who are engaged in city planning, who are architects, who are actually activists, who deal with people's problems and concerns. And they say that if you want me to say what is the primary reason that people are telling us, the experts are telling us, it is that the people are simply not heard when the development plans are drawn up.
Right. Actually, let's elaborate a bit on this because I think the question of the development model, so to speak, is really important. So you have, say, for instance, big cities which are supposed to, have a system to take care of this, but we have seen cities like Delhi, Ahmedabad, all of them really struggling with floods. So when it comes to cities, what is it that really seems to have gone wrong?
Overconstruction seems to be one of the reasons, but overconstruction where is also a question. Construction on the floodplains at any point, is what one of the experts told us on the rivers is that if you build even a single pillar on the route which a river is likely to take, that is enough of an obstruction to actually block the river when make the river spill over when there is excessive rainfall or when there's a flood in the upper reaches. So, as we know, Delhi, the capital city, actually launched this attention on flooding this year because there is tremendous amount of construction activity along the floodplains. Delhi's river Yamuna does have embankments which were strengthened in the 70s. But it just doesn't work simply because when there's excessive rainfall, the river's level goes up. Then the drainage system within the city is not capable of handling that rise in the level within the embanked river, and so the drains just flow back into the city. So what essentially turns out in a big city like Delhi is that the drainage system is simply not taken care of. Interestingly, the public perception in the city and around it is that a drain is something which carries dirty water, refuse. But that's not how the city was planned. There's storm water drains and then there's drains for refuse. But when we looked at the Delhi government report, it showed us that they've sort of intermixed the clean water and the dirty water mixed together, creating this situation where not just the river water or the flood water, but the refuse flows back into their homes. So that creates a problem of, diseases, epidemics. And in the rest of India and the urban areas like we had in Gujarat, there's a massive airport. One doesn't know what were the construction plans behind this project. It's a new project, but you have these constructions which I think mimic Western countries, mimic other countries' plans, and so there's rainfall, unexpected rainfall, and the buildings just collapse. There's flooding. We've seen in Uttar Pradesh that a set of newly produced cars has drowned. So the economic losses across the country have simply not been computed so far. Agricultural states like Punjab, which are also urban, a very urbanized state, completely flooded because the dam has actually burst there in 3 different states to which the river flows. So it's an all in all situation which even journalists would not know which disaster to report on first.
Absolutely. Right, and Pragya, finally, also the Himalayas, one of the states most affected was Himachal Pradesh in the northern part of the country. And there's a different set of issues that have really come up. So maybe could you take us through what were some of those as well?
The Himalayan region actually is also very close to the border areas of India. So the Indian state has repeatedly said that we have a security concern, we're going to build roads, we're going to widen roads, we're going to build more roads. And then there is the increasing demand for power, for energy across the country. So we're going to build hydroelectric power projects, which are, damming every single river. And what people have been telling us is that they're not thinking any of these projects through. Nobody says don't make dams, but they say, like, at least look at the ecology, look at the mountainous terrain. And when you start cutting the hillsides, this keeps coming up, cut them in a way that is scientifically proven to work. Do not cut them in a hurry. When you give out contracts, please monitor them. When you generate waste, then make sure that it's deposited in places where the government has said you should deposit them.
Right.
And none of this seems to be happening. The funny thing, actually, is that people have been opposing this for decades.
Right.
They've been saying that, look, we know this ecosystem, we live here. In a predominantly agricultural country, to start cutting hillsides, it's just shameful that people get not just cut off from the mainstream whenever there is a disaster or excessive rainfall, but rebuilding costs money, diverts resources. So I think what the experts have been telling us is very, very clear. Think through each project. Think about cities as a whole. Think about individual projects based on what people who live there, who work with that environment, tell you.
Right. And I think Himachal also interesting because it's a very well-known tourist site. And I think experts have also pointed out that the unsustained,
Right.
the kind of rush of tourists is also affecting how the ecology is being affected as a whole.
Yeah, the way they're describing it to us is that first you exploited the natural resources, and then in a literal sense of exploitation, you are going so far out to build and construct, thinking that it'll bring people, that you're harming. Tourists get stranded now in every flood. This
Right.
year, the other aspect of this flood, which we must keep in mind, is that the extent of the damage we do not yet know, both to the locals and to the people who are visiting these
Right.
tourist places, either for religious tourism or for general, just to be in the mountains.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pragya. It's a dire scene, but I think also hopefully serves as a wake-up call for policymakers in all these states and at the central government.
Let's hope so.
And finally, we go to Australia, where Facebook's parent company Meta has been fined $14 million US. Now, the reason is pretty obvious. It apparently collected data without informing its users. But here's the catch. The way it collected data was using an app which promised privacy to users. Now, if you're shaking your head thinking, there goes Facebook again, so are we. But the question really is if this fine is too little and too late. And we have with us Anish, who's today donning a tech expert's hat for the episode. Anish, we usually come to you to discuss the machinations of the US war machine in the Asia Pacific, but today it's about maybe the US war machine in its tech form. But could you tell us a bit more about the verdict? The case itself seems quite ironic. Apparently, the app was for supposedly for giving users privacy. So what happened here?
Well, the app was, before it was acquired by Facebook, which later became obviously Meta Platforms, was an Israeli VPN developed essentially to protect your privacy by supposedly masking your VPN and so on and so forth. But the issue that came in, and as it turned out later, was that they were collecting data. And they were collecting data and this was after the acquisition happened. It became part of the Facebook family, as we understand it today. And in that, it was collecting data primarily for Facebook to use for commercial purposes. And this included a whole range of data. We're talking about not just your browser history, but also your shopping history, your wish list on Amazon, your contact details, emails even, and pretty much everything. And much of these data collection was not disclosed. And secondly, there was also the issue of, and this was not part of the case, I believe, but the fact that it was also not actively advertised as a Facebook product was also something that was the reason why initial alarms were raised. Because if it is a Facebook product, it should have been marketed as such with some prominent display of its logo or the company's logo, but none of that was done. And this continued for more than a year actually, and this was pretty much used by Facebook in various ways. And this was not probably just just something that limited to Australia. This probably happened across the world. And as we have learned from obviously later scandals about Facebook's data protection policy or data collection policy, we understand that this was pretty much part of their routine process of collecting data in the most intransparent, opaque, and probably illegal manner around the world.
Right, Anish. So, what has the judge concluded? Because one question is that is $14 million, what does it? It's peanuts for Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the judge's verdict, is that it did do something that was very inherently illegal, something that was not even something that actually caused damage to hundreds of thousands of users. About 271, more than 271 downloads of this app was done in Australia alone. In that
271,000.
Yeah, 271,000. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. And in that 1 year period, and in that, like the judge actually said that she could have charged Facebook for billions of dollars, but then she just considered that all the collection was just a singular process of data collection, and that which was done illegally. So every single act should have ideally cost about a million, more than $1 million Australian dollars each. So it should have ideally gone more than that, but definitely the judge took a very, very meager stand. But essentially, and it's also funny how she presents this $14 million in or 20 million Australian dollars in fines as something that would keep Facebook keep it reminded that something of this sort is not right or legal in Australia. But the issue is that something of this sort, and obviously she actually uses the term that it shouldn't be seen as viable or some kind of cost of usual business, usual conduct of business for Facebook. But the thing is that obviously for Facebook, a $14 million charge is not really a big deal, because you're talking about a company that has assets and is worth more than $100 billion. 14 million is basically running change at this point. So obviously it is going to definitely consider it as just something that it is like a parking ticket, where it just it's just got a wrist on a slap on the wrist, and it's just going to go forward with other such violations in the future and probably be given a similar kind of fines as well.
Right, Anish, in the aftermath of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, as well as many similar issues, there was a lot of discussion, I think, about the kind of laws that are needed. And of course, the European Union passed what is called the GDPR, which is supposed to be quite strict. I understand that Australia is also debating its own privacy law. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Well, Australia is debating a whole set of issues when it comes to platforms, social media platforms. We saw the kind of discord that happened with these companies and the Australian government over not just data sharing, but also over matters of ads and advertisement revenues for various platforms. And the fact that these companies actually make quite a lot of money by simply having, like, including Google, which is a search engine, but obviously the fact that Google places certain websites prominently over the others, and also rates in revenue because of that traffic, and does not obviously share any of that with anybody, including the content creators, is one of the issues. You also have data sovereignty as a major deal, because Australia pretty much more or less depends on the US internet cyberspace laws and the framework, and does not and really needs to develop its own framework that can actually protect its citizens from this similar sort of. It's not. This is just one kind of issues. We are already seeing Facebook with another set of cases with the Australian government, and in most of these cases, the simple matter comes down to data sovereignty of a country that obviously is a US ally, but the fact that its citizens are not protected by the sort of illegal maneuvers that these companies do, and because there are laws, stringent laws that can actually prevent such kind of violations, is something that is a much debated subject, and it goes beyond just data sovereignty. It also goes to the kind of revenue and ad sharing that happens, and also obviously the kind of content that gets. We also see very often debates about how hate speech and how right-wing propaganda is aggravated and even given a bigger platform in platforms like Facebook and Twitter in Australia, and that has been a major part of debate and discussion, a national debate across Australia at this point. So these matters will obviously keep coming up. Such cases, such judgments will definitely put some level of benchmark of what is right and what should be the path forward. But we need to wait and see how the government deals with that through legislations.
Right, Anish, thank you so much for that update. And of course, this is a never-ending topic like many other topics on Daily Debrief are. So I suspect we'll come back to you with more on the deeds and misdeeds of social media giants across the world. And that's all we have time for today. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Do visit our website, peoplesdispatch.org. Go on YouTube, check out our channel, including more episodes of Daily Debrief. Also, visit us on all the social media platforms and follow us. Unfortunately, we still can't do without them, but maybe in some future world we can. Thank you so much for watching.